Toroids. You need them for crafting. You need them for standing. So how do you get them? There are 5 types of toroids. The last 2, the Charisma Toroid and the Lazulite Toroid, are the ones you can get from the spider orbs. You can watch my videos on those to learn more. But these 2 are pretty hard endgame level fights. So the other 3 toroids should be easier to farm if you're a bit more fresh. All 3 of these toroids have a 2% chance to drop randomly from killing enemies in the Orb Vallis, but only when the enemies are in specific locations. The Vega Toroid drops from enemies in the spaceport. The Kalda Toroid drops from enemies in the enrichment labs. And the Solo Toroid drops from enemies at the Temple of Prophet. There is a chance for toroids to spawn inside caves from time to time, but honestly it's not worth the farm. I'll put the link for those cave locations in the description anyway if you're curious. Toroids also have a small chance of dropping from one of these bigger arachnoids, but they're not easy to spawn, and most likely you'll encounter a few when you have alert level 4. Also, the easiest way to farm the Kalda Toroid is to do the second mission for Prophet Taker Heist without turning in your mission. This will spawn enemy dropships around the enrichment labs, and you can easily farm them without worrying about the alert level. Unfortunately, there's no cheap way to farm the other toroids like this. Now let's go over builds. For your Warframe, it's best to go with something which can increase your loot drops. The easiest Warframe to get for this would be Nekros, as his third ability, Desecrate, has a 50% chance to make enemies drop loot. Here's my ideal build for Nekros. So I got the power donation mod because I don't really need power strength. And basically I've shoved every range mod possible into this build. Overextended, Cunning Drift, Stretch. For survival you want Adaptation and Vitality. That's pretty much enough. The Transient Fortitude, you don't really want strength that low, so this simply just raises it a bit, and duration's not really important for this build. You got Equilibrium because enemies will constantly drop energy and health. And you know what? I even installed Atlas's Augment, just for that extra loot chance. One thing I forgot to mention is that Despoil is not a necessary augment, but it makes you use health instead of energy, and it's a big quality of life upgrade when you're playing Nekros, because you can use your other abilities regardless, so it's probably a good idea to use for this one. For Arcanes, I have Arcane Guardian, because extra armor would be great, and Arcane Aegis. You can also choose Khora. Her 4th ability requires an augment to make enemies drop extra loot, and you can get the augment from the Steel Meridian or the Red Veil. But here's a pretty decent build I have for this. So Stand United to increase armor. Sure, you can really go with like any of the other auras, that's fine. You got extra range with this Exilus. You got big health. You got big adaptation. You got the loot augment. You got more ability range, and this ability range. You got energy when you get hit, duration, and a little buff for your cats, if you want to be creative and use the entire set. If not, you do you. Overall, it doesn't really change the ability powers that much, but your focus is getting loot on fairly low level enemies. For Arcanes, I have Arcane Guardian and Theorem Infection. Hydroid also has an augment which gives a 100% chance to increase loot, but you have to kill enemies which are latched onto the tentacles. Personally, not my playstyle, but pretty useful in a team. And you know what? I'll make a build for it. Alright, here's a pretty decent Hydroid build. I actually haven't used it, and I probably won't because no one really wants to farm Toroids with me anyway. But I'd say this is pretty decent to use when you're kind of supporting 3 other team members. Not really good for a solo build. You got Shield Disruption because the Corpus are going to be beefy with shields. You got all the range you can. You got maximum shields, good old adaptation, and then just continuity and intensify, and the augment. So yeah, that should be doable, as long as you can actually aim and kill the enemies on the tentacles. Gigantic asterisk. Atlas can also increase loot from dropped enemies, but he's only got a 25% chance with the augment, so I don't think he's really worth using on the farm. But it would be pretty nice if you could give his helmet ability to another Warframe. And Ivara's Prowl ability also increases loot. But you'll be farming in a high alert situation, so being invisible and fragile is pretty counterintuitive. Not worth using her either. Next, you gotta pick your weapons. The enemies will be all corpus, so if you watch my damage video, you'll know the best elements to use against them are impact, magnetic, electric, toxin, or cold. There will be lots of robots from time to time, so bringing puncture, slash, or radiation's not a bad idea. I like to bring AoE for my primary, and a big deleting pistol for my secondary. Here's some honorable mentions for weapons you can use. The lens. You can just mod it for viral, blast, magnetic, whatever. Riven's not really necessary, it's got high critical chance, so you should be fine without a Riven. High beam value too. The Arca Plasmor, or the Tenet Arca Plasmor. They're just really good shotguns to use. Once again, Riven's not really necessary. In fact, Riven might actually make it worse, because it's really weak. But overall, you can do a pretty decent run with the Arca Plasmor. The Tenet Envoy. I mean, everyone's already talked about this. It's funny rocket launcher, go boom. Give it innate magnetic, and you're set. The Kuva Tsar. Funny AoE. I actually don't have a decent build on this, so do whatever. The Batacore. Listen, this gun's pretty good. More people should use it. It has innate magnetic, and then you can just add corrosive to it to just kill the armored corpus, and it's got a pretty ridiculous critical chance. Like, especially when you add galvanized scope to it, and with how fast it fires, and when it charges fires. It's basically the Mazolan, but as a primary. The Phantasma, it does innate radiation damage, but if you give it magnetic mods, you could do pretty well. It's basically an AoE shotgun, and it's got really fast reloads too. The Supra. The Simulor, or the Cyanide version. This is 100 emoji, laughing till I'm crying emoji, shitting my pants emoji. It's got innate magnetic. You can even give it corrosive or radiation, and it will still have innate magnetic. It's just designed to get rid of corpus, man. Use it. Nucor or Kuva Nucor. Funny beam, give inflation. Also, it's got innate radiation, and you can mod magnetic. And the beam for the Kuva version will latch onto 2 people at once. The Tenet Detron or the Mara Detron. So you can give this mod, which explodes enemies with magnetic damage. I haven't actually tested to see how well it works, but it works well enough. And you know what? Give it the magnetic damage. Once again, Riven not necessary. And you can just make it go brr. The Azima. So the great thing about the Azima is its high base slash damage, and the secondary fire will just throw a bouncing Betty grenade and damage everyone around it. You can just keep spamming this as a grenade and then switch to your primary and shoot enemies again. Riven, probably very necessary. The Secure Dual Sestra. The Tenet Exec. As a Tenet weapon, it has a lot of capacity, so you can just pop this here and pop this here. No Umbra mod necessary. It's got pretty high impact damage too, give it magnetic, and bada boom. Fragor Prime. I love me some hammers. Kuva Shield Egg. I love me some hammers. The Heliocore. I love me some hammers. Or pets. By the way, Khora's cat. Here's a build for that. It's pretty good. It kills things. For pets, I highly recommend the Smita Kavat because it has the charm ability, and the charm ability has a pretty good chance of just increasing your loot. Here's the full build I used for the Kavat. But if you don't want to go for this, or if the cat is too squishy, it's probably best to use a carrier, and you know, it's the beefiest drone. Or you can use the Vulpaphyla since they are unkillable. If you can use archguns or necromechs, then be sure to come prepared with those. For archgun, be sure to have a good AoE gun and great mods that work against the corpus, like the Kuva Ayagana. Probably the best one for this use case. And for mech, I highly recommend using Bone Widow instead of Void Rig. Or, you know, it's just preference, but Bone Widow can heal and Void Rig can just re-heal if you have that one specific mod, unless you're constantly getting hammered by enemies. And for your operator, be sure to use the Vezerin tree or the Zenuric tree, just depending on if you want to heal more or if you want more energy. I highly recommend equipping the Magus Repair to save yourself from potential deaths, and Magus Lockdown to make enemies sit quietly together. Also, be sure to bring an Archwing Launcher. Not that they're very useful in a fight, but they're super useful for getting to and from your destination. You can find it in the Tenno Labs at your local clan dojo. And finally, try to play in a full squad. The chances of your Warframes increasing loot is additive, so more loot if more people. It's probably best not to jump in a public session and ruin someone else's fishing trip, so be sure to coordinate beforehand. Now for the actual run. Go up to Utico and select the lowest level bounty. You won't actually do the bounty, but the point of this is to lower the level cap just to make life easier. Next, go to the location you want to farm a Toroid at and wait for them to start harassing you. As soon as an alert beacon has spawned by an enemy, begin your killings. Wow, first try, huh? That wouldn't even let me finish what I'm trying to say in the video. Of course, you try to keep as many beacons up as you can, just to get as many enemies as possible to spawn for your farm. And that's it. Use your abilities to increase the loot and survive. Once you get a Toroid, you'll get a massive pop-up on the bottom right showing what you got one. And keep going for however long you want. Be sure to subscribe for more videos and let me know if I missed anything in the comments. Bazinga!